I did a video the other day about cards. It's kind of an introduction to cards and how they work on boards and backlogs. I showed you how they are presented in Jira and Azure Boards. My name is Alex Crossley. Today I'm going to go through how they present on backlogs. So this is really a follow-on from the cards discussion. So if you haven't watched the cards discussion, just go back. It's only about 10 minutes. We'll talk about what cards are and why we have many different types. Today I'm going to talk about how they formulate onto backlogs. So backlogs in Jira and Azure Boards. Let's get on. So let's just quickly have a look at what I mean by when I talk about cards. So this is a card in Jira or Azure Boards. They're purple and they represent some customer value that needs to be delivered. And then the cards that we put inside there are going to be user stories. In Jira they're green, in Azure Boards they're blue, but they sit inside the value. Why are we doing it? Well, we're going to deliver this value, and these are the two stories we're going to do in order to deliver the value. And then finally you have some activity, the tasks, that in Jira are blue, in Azure Boards they're yellow. They sit inside there. So that's how we organize our work. That's how we find from the customer value all the way down. So those, in order to get that work done, they sit on a backlog and a to-do list. So if I look at this, these are lists, the same items just put into lists. We have a list, we've only got one customer value feature at the moment, so that sits at the top, one epic if you're in Jira language, but that would be more than one in a real team. We have those two stories, and we have a bunch of activity that needs to be done. And those are what we call backlogs, to-do lists. That one was going to be really the remit of the product owner is going to be looking at that, how are we delivering value to the customer. The team's going to be looking after this with the help from the Scrum Master, and every individual is going to want this. You're going to work for 2 weeks, say you need a list of how many get everything done, you need your task list there. You own that and look after that as an individual. So those are backlogs. That's your introduction to backlogs. That's what a backlog is, it's a to-do list. I'm just going to complicate things because if you work like that and you're one team and there's no one else you work with and it's really siloed, it's a very small startup company. I'm going to talk about at scale, so I want to just introduce that to you. Now this is more an Azure Boards thing than a Jira thing, but I think it's worth touching on. So if you're working at scale, you're likely to have, first of all, more than one customer outcome, but also, let's just say, 4 teams, for instance. It's not even a very big organization. The smallest one I've worked in has been 6 teams. But here are the 4 teams. Now, they're going to have scale, so there's going to be people and teams operating, coordinating their activity, and they're going to create things like the incremental release for the organization. You two work on that release, you two work on that release. And then they're also going to have probably a project backlog as well. In this case, I've just put it all into one project. So this is one project with 4 teams, and I experience this on a pretty regular basis. This is the size of a typical project. So those form backlogs as well. Every single color you can see forms backlogs. And that can be represented pretty easily in Azure Boards, and I'll show you that briefly. But what I'm going to try and focus on the others. But just recognize that we do have backlogs there. We have a project backlog. The executive are going to be care about it. And we have a release backlog, which your portfolio and your program manager is going to care about. And then we have the 3 backlogs that we just talked about. We have the customer value backlog that the product owners are going to own. We have these team backlogs. We've got 4 teams, so we've got 4 backlogs there. And then we've got these individual task backlogs. You work with these day to day, sprint to sprint, quarter to quarter. This is really the interface. Monthly for releases you're reviewing, but probably putting them out quarterly, and then whatever the cadence is for your executives. So this is an important view. We're talking about 5 backlogs in a bigger organization. It depends on where you are and what perspective you want to look at. And when you look at your backlogs, you only want to see the cards that are relevant to the size and the variety of work that you've got. So let me just zoom in on this a little bit more, because in a scaled enterprise, and this is for scale, we do have this line that exists. We have, and I'm not going to call them the leadership because it's not really about leaders and the top of the hierarchy. These are servant leaders that are looking after the releases, the release manager, the project manager, the guys, the portfolio leads. Yes, you've got executives providing funding, but really the interface between those and the delivery is the customer value. So this is the most important part of your entire world. Have we got our customer value backlog sorted out? Do we understand what we're trying to deliver? And then the team will be able to deliver it, and these guys will be able to control the value, be able to see control. Control's not the right word, maybe it is in my context, but understand, report, have the feedback loop in place. So the enterprise backlog and the team backlog do link through the customer backlog, and that's the purple items. Okay, so I'm going to focus on these 2 backlogs and really focus on in fact, I'm going to focus on the customer value backlog. But actually, if I go back, all the backlogs behave the same. I'm just going to talk about some attributes If you're new to backlogs, you need to be aware of that these behaviors are universal across all backlogs. So the first one, look at it, is that there's an order to it. It's not just a to-do list just scattered. You work from the top down. It's simple. If you have a notebook and you have your individual tasks, you might write the dates of when you get things done. We don't do that. This is a computer system. In fact, they're cards on the physical cards on the board. You can just reorder them. You don't have to write dates on them. And you start from the top, and when they're done, they go to the done column. This is the same. The backlog, the most important feature is top-down priority. How you prioritize your customer value by the value. It might be different on other things. You might prioritize your team backlog based on availability or enablers that you need to do. But you do need to prioritize. It's a really important thing. If you want a good backlog, you have to prioritize. The next thing is, in order to promote that prioritization, you do need owners. Every single card on every single backlog should be assigned to somebody. Even if it's in the to-do, should belong to somebody. So make sure you've got owners. It's the second thing of a good, healthy backlog. So the first thing is make sure it's ordered. Second thing, make sure every card belongs to somebody and someone's taking ownership of those cards. Might be the same person through the whole backlog. The third thing is to make a really healthy backlog, get some size on it. What's the effort and complexity of the work that you put on there? Right from the project all the way down. If it's simple and small, it's a small one. It's bigger, bigger. And it's important because you're going to prioritize on value, but there are other considerations. Okay, that's what makes a healthy backlog. Now let's just have a quick review of where we are. We've got cards. They're purple if they're really big. They're green in Jira. They're user stories to be done incrementally. And we have tasks below. And for that, we have created those into backlogs. So now I'm going to show you what they look like in Jira. So if I jump into Jira, here we have the purple backlog. The big things, the epics. They're called epics in Jira. They're called features in Azure Boards. There is the backlog. There are the cards. Now I could click on any one of these and it would show me the backlog of stories inside. But what I'd like to see is all of the stories that this team has on its backlog. So here are the big items. Here are the green items, the stories, and underneath each story, when I click on it, it'll show me the task backlog. So I can see all three backlogs on one screen here. I can't go up. That's not really, well, it can be done, but it's not built in like we do, like it is in the Azure Boards. But there are all three backlogs. That's how backlogs work. I know that Epic they give a higher priority than Epic 2. I know that Story is a higher priority to Story 2. I can see here that Story 3 belongs to Epic 2. You can see that. And if I wanted to move that up, I'd just drag it up. And that could be a higher priority story to the team than the value is to the business. That's allowed. Okay, so let's have a look at Azure Boards. In Azure Boards, it's a very different interface. We still have the navigation down the side. So if I was to go back, you can see the navigations down the sides. We pick backlogs. In Azure Boards, you pick backlogs. You get a slightly different view, of course. Now we're seeing what the purple items are in the middle of the screen rather than down the side. If I want to see more, I click on it or I expand and see the stories underneath, and I can do that. Or I can come up here and I can click and just see the backlog items in order. And again, I can move story 2 up to be the highest priority to the team. And then when I click on these cards, I can see the task list, where the task list is down here. We'll talk more about that when we go into looking at how we do our sprints. You wouldn't really be looking at task lists unless it's in the sprint anyway. So that's how it's presented in the two systems. Really straightforward. All the concepts are exactly the same. Again, the naming convention is different. Don't get stuck on the naming convention. Think of it, purple items at the top from a team's point of view. That's where the value is being delivered. And then we've got incremental delivery of that through stories. And then we've got tasks below the activity. That's how we really want to look at it. Now, what I was showing you here is when we click here, you can go up. The layer above in Azure Boards is epics. I know that was used in Jira as being the purple layer. Don't let that confuse you. Just think of it as an orange layer. And then we've got even a green layer above that if you're working at scale. This is a Scrum team, so I've tried not to do too much on that. I will talk about scale in the future. Okay, there's your backlogs. Backlogs in and showing you in Jira and Azure Boards as well, but the concepts are really identical in both. Identical if you've got a list there or if you're doing a book. All right, thanks very much for your time. You stay safe.